I want to look at the Conservative Party's defence of the two-child benefit cap. It's a policy increasingly out of step with public morality, if not public opinion, on both the left and the far right. So both Reform UK and the Labour Party plan to restore the the child benefit to people who have more than two children. At the heart of this debate, writes Esther McVey, once dubbed the most unpopular politician on Merseyside, charging forward like a reincarnated balaclava trooper at the charge of the Light Brigade in Crimea. It's all very relevant, really, isn't it? As we have so much going on in Crimea again at the moment. In a week where Nigel Farage flirts with social democracy and Labour backbenchers rumble about child poverty, McVey has emerged to tell them all, "You shall not pass!" Let's begin with clarity. The two-child benefit cap, introduced in 2017 by the Conservatives, restricts means-tested benefits like universal credit and child tax credit to the first two children in a family. Child benefit is not affected. That's an important distinction. And according to the Institute for Fiscal Studies, the cap costs some families around £4,300 per year. It now affects more than 450,000 households, with that figure expected to climb to 800,000 by 2029. Esther McVey's defence of the cap is both moralistic and economically utilitarian, if misjudged. Her message is stark. It is financially and morally indefensible to have children one cannot afford. In one breath, she invokes Victorian self-reliance. In another, she laments the taxpayer as the exhausted patron of indolence. And this from the woman who once praised the rise of food banks as a symbol of community coming together, as though desperation were a form of civic engagement. McVey now warns that scrapping the cap would deliver windfalls to 180,000 large families in which no adult is employed, a tab of £3.5 billion, encouraging dependency, she cries, is not compassion, it is surrender. The real theatre, however, is not McVey versus Labour. That's familiar. It's McVey turning on Reform UK and Nigel Farage. Just days after endorsing reform in Runcorn, albeit with the same subtlety as an uninvited godmother at a christening, McVey now brands Reform's new stance on the cap bizarre. Farage's suggestion that Reform would abolish the cap, not out of fondness for welfareism, but to help struggling families, has enraged the Tory right. It's heresy, it's electoral betrayal, it's also, frankly, hilarious and right. Because in the end, we need more people to have more babies to be able to pay the tax bill in about 20 years, when there will be so many pensioners, we won't have the money from taxation to afford to keep them, to afford the pension bill. McVey attacks Farage for chasing Labour to the left, but Farage is chasing something else, votes in Stoke and Sunderland, and his pivot is not ideology, it's instinct, and that as ever makes him dangerous. Because he's not yoked to what is right, he's yoked to what gets him the next vote. And Kemi Badenoch, bearing her now rote charge, so Labour and Reform are locked, she says, in a race to the bottom over welfare. The phrase is vivid if tired, but Badenoch is firm about the bottom. Taxpayers, many of whom chose not to have children, should be made to underwrite the fecundity of others. That's what she's asking. Well, McVey and Badenoch, well, I'm afraid in the end we're all going to have to underwrite the fecundity of others if there's not enough fecundity. Because we're all going to get older, and we're going to need people who are going to be able to pay the tax to sort out the problem of looking after that older generation in 20 years. McVey and Badenoch present themselves as Thatcherite moralists in an age of economic relativity. And the only problem, it's not working. They are defending an unpopular policy, by using unpopular rhetoric. And the Conservatives argue the cap encourages work. Well, what bosh. McVey herself argues that the cap encourages work. Indeed, 280,000 capped families include at least one working adult, she said, now. But the 180,000 families where no one works are held up as the real target. They are the symbolic bogeyman of Tory social policy, large, idle and subsidised. Yet charities and economists say the cap punishes children for their parents' choices. Gordon Brown, perhaps the conscience of British welfare debate, is urging Labour to scrap the cap and fund the change through taxes on gambling and banks. Very good. Keir Starmer, ever cautious, says he's looking at all options. That usually means something is about to happen, just not quite yet. To understand McVey's politics is to understand defiance. Raised in Liverpool, loathed in Liverpool, she's made a career out of turning her back on the very communities for which she sprang. Her support for the bedroom tax, defence of benefit sanctions, comments about phones and food banks are legendary, or infamous, depending on your politics. And now she's back on her war horse, sabre in hand, charging towards both Labour and Reform. Reform, of course, her friends in the TV studios, as if she alone can rescue the nation's purse from the invading hordes. Esther McVey's crusade is not without political purpose. For the Conservatives, holding the line on the two-child benefit cap is a way of distinguishing themselves from Farage's populism and Labour's redistributive tendencies. It's a flag painted and planted in the soil of common sense, but that most nebulous of British slogans means nothing. And common sense, when backed by callousness, quickly curdles into cruelty. And as the cost of living crisis deepens and more families fall into poverty through no fault of their own, the politics of punishment must wear thin. In the end, Esther McVey may win the argument inside her own party, but in the wider country, the battle may already be lost. The cavalry has charged, the bugle blown, and Esther McVey rides again. But one wonders whether she is leading a victorious charge or simply galloping into political irrelevance under the banner of yesterday's war.